Hey everyone, my name's Alex Ramsby. I'm an MSP consultant here at Profile Tech. Today I wanted to go over some back-to-school tips for MSPs. Let's get into it. So I wanted to cover a handful of topics here. Wanted to cover your foundational layer of the people aspect, looking at school and staff. Want to cover the infrastructure with on-prem servers, or kind of what the plan is for file servers, anything like that. And then I want to cover the cloud aspect of email security and antivirus, as what's out there, what's covering your back, or what's alerting you if things are being intrusive. So with that, we'll start with the staff and students here. So coming into another year of COVID, there may have been some changes to the curriculum that may require some expectations to be set or some adjustments to be taken from the MSP to make the school year run as smoothly as possible. Believe me, it is better to be proactive and reach out to the schools now, understanding kind of what they're heading towards and making sure that anything that they want to do in the future is something that you can support. Otherwise, it becomes a last minute request to you, and then it becomes an emergency situation, which is never good for anybody. So looking at just a couple examples here, starting with documents, shares, file access, start sparking that question with the schools. How do they plan on accessing their documents? Do they want to change anything? What we're looking for is if there's like an on-prem server, just kind of reevaluating who needs what access to what share. Cybersecurity and safety is another good one. What we're looking for there is kind of any training programs that you have in place, or email spoofing training, something like that. Ideally, this is applied to students and teachers, because as we know, we're moving into this new generation, and we want to make sure that everybody's kind of covered or at least trained and has that expectation moving forward. And then lastly, but another bullet here, looking into some software requirements. If they're looking for any kind of new projectors, or maybe they're trying to do some new conferencing or something like that, what are they expecting out of the software, and does that require any interference from you as a MSP? So always remember, teamwork makes the dream work, especially true when it comes to communication. Students, staff, and you as the MSP all take part of the IT ecosystem at the school. So making sure that you lay down a solid foundation, everything's kind of in place on your end, and then just following up on any expectations that they have going forward, so that everybody's clear on what kind of the limitations are, or what the expected result is going forward. And that saves you a lot of time in the future, that if there was ever a crisis, hopefully you can ideally prevent it, but you can also have an SOP on this is how that works if something does happen. Taking a look at some numbers here. So pre-COVID, but just early ending 2018, there was a total of 120 publicly reported attacks on schools. Since COVID, there has been an extreme spike and an upward trend as we progress forward into 2021. We don't have that number just yet, but I'm assuming it's on its way up. This is especially true, and the reason being that more students are working from home or working remote, so that kind of gives the cyber criminals the aspect to be able to hack in to a system who's possibly using a VPN to get access to a network that way. We're looking at a huge increase just in 2 years here, from 120 to 408. 2 years ago in 2019, we're looking at 348. So that's even still roughly 70 increase just from last year. And I would assume that trend is going to continue going up. So what can we do to start locking things down? First, I would look into group policies. Anything you can kind of preset across all of your computers to lock them down more. Ideally, your servers would require more attention. There is a guide out there called the Security Technical Implementation Guide, or the STIG, if you've heard of it that way. any server or any operating system that you find, that will give you kind of a DoD level requirement of anything that the government would use or require on a server. That's going to give you every criteria that would have to be met before it's considered DoD worthy. So I just pulled just a handful of them here. What we're looking at is kind of your generic best practice, but we all know that that doesn't always happen. So just laying them out as a reminder to check them. And especially moving forward, autoplay should be turned off. This isn't something that used to be kind of a best practice a while back, but now that we're getting into kind of the remote work or servers being more cloud oriented, having this turned off will prevent some of the software from just auto starting or being able to, plug in a USB on a system or something like that and just kind of auto hacking the system that way. Reversible password encryption should be disabled. That basically allows somebody to unencrypt a password or allows the system to store the unencryption key. Ideally, this should be disabled. The password should never be known. It should only be reset if you need access to that account. The always install with elevated privileges option must be disabled. This is very handy. Like, this is probably my top notch along with complex passwords. What we're looking at here, this is going to indicate that if you have this enabled, that your software will not prompt you. It will just auto assume that you are allowed to install software. So with this being disabled, it always prompts, do you want to provide the software administrator privileges, yes or no, every time. And that's what we want. Otherwise, somebody could get in and just have admin privileges, especially if that user hates the prompts. Yes, I get it, but we should have some kind of restriction in place so that not everything is just getting through. And then the last one, complex passwords. I know we're talking schools here, and I know we're talking, the younger kids who are just kind of getting into computers, but most of these kids have cell phones and they have their own emails and things like that. So we need to start training them to use complex passwords. We are in 2021 here. The kids who are kind of up and coming, computers are getting faster, hackers are getting more powerful in terms of what they can do. We need to make sure that at least a symbol is installed in every password. I know the younger kids, I've personally set up an MSP at a school where the younger kids had a different restriction and they were allowed to use things like car, boat, turtle, or something like that. I personally wouldn't recommend that. I would always put at least one symbol in there. Just train them to get used to putting in a symbol and kind of remembering that in there. And as they grow into being, adults or, more people as we're used to dealing with, they will just be accustomed to inserting a symbol or a comma or something like that into their password, which drastically makes the password harder to crack. All right, and then the last slide I've got for you today, just document everything. Anything that you do for the client, make sure it's documented somewhere. And then also not only is it documented, but it's also communicated. So sometimes we get requests from clients who say, hey, can you please change this? And absolutely, you look in there and sometimes you do have to get permission, from a higher, elevated privilege person who can make that call. But even so, anytime the changes are made, make sure you document them for your own sanity. And then you also communicate that to an email for any party that is impacted. So if there's a student or something like that that's being impacted, hey, you guys are changing the password complexity passwords, for example, just put out a bulletin, making sure that the school is putting out a bulletin that everyone is clear on what the changes and what that's going to impact. It sucks for everybody when it's, many months or, even just many weeks down the road when somebody finds out and they feel like they're the last one to know when it could have just been a bulletin. I also want to just kind of toss in this at the end here. Please, if you haven't already, talking to you MSPs out there, if you haven't already, please invest in a documentation system. Do not store any information. I mean, you can kind of make the argument for network implementation and IP addresses that that's not super, required or information. But if a hacker gets a hold of your OneNote document or your Excel document as plain text, even, passwords are great, but somebody can crack a document password or even unencrypt it without the password. And now they have a full map of your entire network and how that client is set up. So please invest in something like IT Glue or IT Boost. I think SolarWinds is out there. That's a good one. It's just something other than your local machine. I know it's an upfront cost, but this is going to save you many moons in the future. We are headed to where everything is an attack vector. So having everything either in a cloud or encrypted is going to save you in the long term. Thanks for watching. We post a new video every week to share our knowledge on Automate. To learn more about what we do, please visit proveltech.com. There's a link in the video description below.